So for those of you I haven't met, I'm Rob Knopel. I'm the Dean of the College of Education here at the University of South Florida. And I am just ecstatic to see the number of people in this room on a Friday afternoon to come and join us for what we think is going to be a wonderful opportunity, a wonderful learning opportunity for all of us. Today's event is sponsored by the Diversity Committee in the College of Education. The members of the committee shared with me earlier this week that we have guests with us from Clay County. Is that right? Who's from Clay? There we go. Hello. So thank you. Thank you for making the drive. Thank you for coming to join us in Tampa. Thank you very much for being here. As I said, this is an incredible opportunity for us here in the college to welcome a nationally recognized speaker to our community. I am quite familiar with Dr. Ladson-Billings' work. I had the great pleasure to meet her while I was a faculty member at Clemson. I was sharing with her this afternoon that I attended a workshop that she did for our elementary education students. And as I was transitioning out of Clemson, I had two educational leadership doctoral students that wrote incredible dissertations on preparing culturally competent, culturally responsive, and socially just educational leaders. And the theoretical framework that they chose to use for their study was none other than the work of Dr. Ladson-Billings. As I was supervising those dissertations, one of the things that really sort of intrigued me was the need for educators to be bicultural. And as we went through the literature, one of the things that we learned was that nascent educators really need to understand their identity. And that was the first step of meeting the needs for students. That includes both an acknowledgement of your own bias and the privilege that you carry with you when you walk into the classroom. It's incumbent on us as educators to understand how identity can manifest itself as deficit thinking, deficit behaviors, and low expectations for the students and the communities that we serve. As the Dean of the College of Education in a remarkably diverse city and area, the Tampa Bay region, I'm very often asked, so how do you prepare culturally responsive educators? How are you preparing students to meet the needs of the schools where they're going to serve? The answer to that question is through the work of our speaker today. It's through a review of the literature. When you look deep into the literature on educator preparation, it's clear that the content of programs has to include both knowledge and skills. And so we talk about that a lot when we're writing curriculum and thinking about what we want our kids to know and be able to do. But through the work of our speaker today, we know that content must not just include knowledge, it's got to give them the opportunity to practice and apply their skills. But we also know from the literature that the process of becoming culturally competent is a difficult thing for kids developmentally where they are in their late teens and early 20s. Teacher education candidates have to learn and internalize and enact the changing beliefs about culture and about context. And that's tough to do when you're teaching them how to write lesson plans, different methods of instruction and classroom management techniques. Our students need to know that being an educator is not just mastery of content knowledge. They must be able to understand and apply appropriate pedagogical technique. In addition, they must apply content the content that they acquire in the program about systemic racism and equity to their practice. It's really not enough for them to just be able to point it out. They need to react to it, and they need to apply different pedagogical skills. We know that the opportunity to apply knowledge, the practice of teaching, if you will, is an important part of teacher preparation, educator preparation, especially when it's coupled with opportunities for reflection. And so we've worked hard in our college to advance in that area. We've created a newly created Office of Field and Clinical Education. And through that office, we're trying to develop a wide range of opportunities for our students that provide hands-on experience in K-12 schools across various communities and learning environments, including both urban and rural populations. While many of these opportunities are still in development, I'm looking forward to sharing more with you in the future as we continue to advance the university's efforts towards remaining a diverse a diverse and inclusive community. A mission of the University of South Florida is to continue its tradition of being a diverse campus in which differences are respected and appreciated, because it is this type of environment that promotes more effective teaching, produces greater learner outcomes, and better prepares students for an increasingly diverse workforce and pluralistic society. Our work in strengthening the diversity of the USF community, especially in the College of Education, is reflective in USF's commitment to touching lives and improving the world. So, I'm incredibly proud that we are welcoming Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings here today, because she is not only a nationally recognized expert on this topic, she is the nationally recognized expert on this topic. I told Dr. Ladson-Billings that one of the fun things I got to do today was to go to our living learning community, and I was sharing that with them, and told them that I hope that they would have the opportunity to join us this afternoon. So I hope everyone in attendance today is going to be inspired by what we learned today, and that you'll feel empowered to take what you've learned and apply it in your work within K-12 schools throughout the state of Florida and beyond. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Bonzel Augusto. She will be introducing Dr. Ladson-Billings. Dr. Augusto is an associate professor of educational leadership and policy studies in the University of South Florida College of Education. Dr. Augusto is a member of the College of Education Diversity Committee, and she, alongside with her colleagues, have put a great deal of effort to help make today's events possible. We hope that you enjoy today's presentation, and please join me in thanking Dr. Augusto and her colleagues for putting together today's event. Welcome to USF. Go Bulls.
Good afternoon, fellow educators and community members. Thank you. It is my honor to acknowledge the land and the people, provide opening remarks, and introduce our guests this evening. I appreciate that you have traveled here to participate in this special event, come to a place with a long history, land that has been stewarded by indigenous peoples who often go unnamed and uncelebrated. I thank the Tocobaga and Calusa peoples for their care of the land, air, and waters. And while most of their ancient mounds are now covered by homes, shopping centers, and parking lots, the Hillsborough River remains, but it was once known by the Timucuas as the Mocoso River, and by the Seminoles as the Locha-Pocachisca River. I call on us all to walk in solidarity with indigenous peoples today who continue to refuse colonization, resettlement, and displacement. I acknowledge those who here at USF have helped to make this event possible. Please wave and wave back. Members of the Diversity Committee and its co-chairs, Dr. Braunstein, Drs. Kane and Jones. Our sponsors, the Anshin Center and its director, Constance Hines. Vice President of the Florida chapter of the National Association of Multicultural Education and the managing editor of the newspaper, Dr. Jennifer Jacobs and Raven Robinson. Owner of Essential Events, Kimberly Brown. Are you here, Kimberly? Thank you for the table decorations, etc. Media experts, Elizabeth and Gasser, and Jordan Myers on video and his team, thank you. Student volunteers, Jennifer Pettis and Jennifer McGorvey, and the administrative leadership team of the College of Education, so hands for the students, thank you for volunteering. And you've met our dean, Dr. Robert Canopo, and our assistant deans, or associate deans, Ann Cranston Gingras and Kathy Bradley Clue, so thanks to them as well. Now my remarks and introduction of our esteemed guest. Have you ever asked yourself, how did I get here? Or how did I come to this moment when I am about to do something for the first time? I found myself pondering such questions this week, which led me to reflect on a time when, as a high school teacher, I wondered why there seemed to be so many teachers who were disinvested in the success of Black and brown boys. For my master's thesis, I wondered what leadership boys in special education would view as inspirational, and how would they respond to curriculum built around Black and brown men who led social justice movements. While writing the thesis, I came upon the work of Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings, and I admit that at that time, I had no idea or no knowledge of the person I was citing. I was only interested in her work. Fast forward 2 years, after she agreed to serve as my major advisor, and I was accepted into the doctoral program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. When she returned from a leave, I went to her office and I asked her something like, "How do I develop a relationship with you?" And her response to me, which she may not recall, was, "I will know you through your work." And I came to interpret that statement as a call to express myself as a learner and educator. And I took work to mean not just paid employment or just intellectual work, but also to include the deeds, the acts, the practices, and performances. And over the last decade, I've continued to refer back to that statement, and now I offer it to you today to think about our roles in the future of education, and public education in particular. To not only imagine the possibilities, but to also do the work of educating. Now, as an associate professor of curriculum studies and educational leadership and policy studies, I continue to think about leadership and what the work of leading educational organizations entails. And as a member of the population here in the United States, which is not always so great, I continue to think about what the work of leading this nation entails, or should entail, to best serve the students before us. "I will know you through your work," she said. Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings has offered us frameworks to help us show our best selves to our students, families, and their communities, especially those who are marginalized, minoritized, oppressed, and who work daily to find a way to show their talents. From culturally relevant pedagogy to critical race theory, on to hip-hop education, and now systematic theology. Her contributions to education are immense. She has been recognized for her work by major educational and research organizations. She is past president of the American Educational Research Association, AERA, and the current president of the National Academy of Education. She is a fellow in the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, author of several books and many articles. She is a trailblazer in education, and I am honored to introduce her, Professor Emerita at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, my academic mother, Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I bring you greetings from the land of 12 bands, tribes, and federations of Wisconsin. And I am so delighted to be here. I am what they call a snowbird. So I just drove up here from Apollo Beach very casually. There was no ice, no sleet, no snow on the ground, so I was fine. Thank you, Dean Knopel, for that important opening, explaining what our work is really about and what we're trying to do in this field we call education. And of course, a thank you to Von Zell. She's right, I am her academic mother. I have 55 academic children. These are all doctoral students. We're not, the masters and the undergrads, they don't get to be family members. They, as my doctoral students say, they foster children, you know. You just take care of them for a little while, but they go back to their parents. But we are your children, and I have 55 such children. Of those 55, 19 of them are African American women. I'm really proud of having been able to do that work. We're in the middle of Black History Month, and as we say, if you don't see it, how can you be it? And one of the reasons I stayed at Wisconsin for as long as I did, 26 years, is because people needed to see it. They needed to believe they could do this. And so that, in some ways, is an admonition to you as you do your hiring, is that you have to put people in front of the room for people who sit in those rooms to see that and say, oh, you know what, I think I can do that. So I'm told I'm doing a workshop, so I'm not doing a keynote. So when you say workshop, I'm always reminded, many years ago, I think I took my youngest son with me to a workshop I was conducting. And he might have been 10 or 11 years old at the time. And at the end of it, he said, well, I didn't see nobody do no work. Why was that a workshop? So it always stuck in my mind that part of what I have to do if you ask me to do a workshop is to put you to work. So you will do some work in our time that we have together. We should start off by just me sharing with you who I am. I do have 50 years of teaching experience. Now, right now, people are going, oh my God, how old is that woman, right? Tell you what I tell everybody, I started when I was 5. Okay? They were like, who was that little baby down there teaching the middle school kids? But the truth of the matter is, I indeed began a career in public education in 1968. I've got water, thank you. 1968. Walked into a classroom, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, School District of Philadelphia, in a part of the city that even though I'd grown up in that city, I would never go to that part of the city. And in fact, when I told my family this is where I was going to work, everybody went, you going down there? Because it was so different than what I grew up with. It was a white, working class, ethnic community. My students never referred to themselves, however, as white. They said, I'm Italian, I'm Irish, I'm Jewish, I'm Lebanese. That their ethnic identity was really who they were. And that was eye-opening for me, to understand that people have a sense of who they are. And that sense is either validated or invalidated in schools and classrooms. I did not start out to be a teacher. I know everybody wants you to have this wonderful little story about ever since I was a little girl, I was going to be a teacher, I lined all my dolls up. I went to college. I loved college, had a great experience. I did choose HBCU, so I had a good time. I went to what might be thought of as a naturally integrated high school. My high school, because of its geographic location, was right on the cusp between, a black community and a white, actually not white, a Jewish community. Big high school, 4,500 students. And so when I made the decision to choose an HBCU, it was a surprise because I was a high-performing student. I think I was number 14 out of a class of 450 students, so I was doing okay. And people wanted to know, and I'd been admitted into University of Pennsylvania, Temple University, LaSalle, Bryn Mawr, Swarthmore. All local schools were recruiting me. I had good grades, I had good test scores. And people were surprised that I chose this HBCU in Baltimore. Like, why are you going there? My flip answer to my white friends was, so I don't have to explain my hair. Okay, so I know I'm gonna do some stuff to my hair at night. I don't want to have to explain to you what I'm doing. I need you to understand what I'm doing. In fact, help me do this. So I don't need to go to a school where you're going to wash your hair every single day. No. That's my flip answer. But my serious answer was I needed to be in an environment where I saw people who looked like me, who were engaged in serious intellectual work. And I never looked back. I was a history major. I loved it. I had one of the most preeminent historians by the name of Dr. Benjamin Quarles. He was someone that John Hope Franklin had begged and begged and begged to come to Duke. And Dr. Quarles said, I need to be here Students here need quality history instruction. I loved history, and I was an English minor. I loved English. I loved writing. And so in my heart of hearts, my dream job, not teaching, my dream job is I'm gonna be a writer. I did tell y'all I'm a working class family, right? You can't go home and tell these people. I'm going upstairs in my room because I'm a writer. No. They paid money for you to go get a job. And as my dad would say, you need a job with insurance. And that's how he said, insurance and benefits. You can write on the side, but you got to get a paycheck. And so I was like asking my friend, well, what can I do? They said, well, you know, you could get in the teacher ed program. You could teach history. So I was like, oh, okay. I literally chose it because I didn't think of anything else I could do at the time, given my interests and my expertise. But I fell in love with teaching while I was teaching. So one of the little dirty secrets of teacher education is that we actually can't teach you how to teach. Can't do it. You have to practice teaching. And the longer you practice it, if you are paying good attention, the better you'll get at it. Most of you can think back to year one and go, oh my God, I should probably write a letter to those people and their parents and everybody else and tell them how sorry I am for what I did. Because you're learning. Now, I said it's a dirty little secret of teacher education, but it's the dirty little secret of every profession. Can I tell you that law school can't teach you how to be a lawyer? I could go to the law school at the University of Wisconsin right now and take all the courses, pass all the classes. That will not make me a lawyer. What will make me a lawyer is practicing law. Medical schools can't make you a doctor. What makes you a doctor is practicing medicine. Now, each of these places will give you knowledge, and they may give you some skills, but they are practices. And so you have to practice it, and that's exactly what happened to me. As I began practicing teaching, I began falling in love with it. I began saying, wow, this really does make a difference in the world. It does change people's lives. I spent 13 years as a public school teacher, 10 of them in Philadelphia, 3 of them in California, and 37 years of college and university teaching. So before Wisconsin, I was teaching at the university, well, Santa Clara University in the San Francisco Bay Area. So been doing it a long time. In a long continuum. I've taught as low as 2nd grade, which was a kick, because nobody told me these people cry. I'm like, why are people crying? There's no crying in school. And they're like, yeah, it is. There's a lot of crying. But I did it as kind of whim because I got really curious about the fact that kids were struggling to read in 8th grade. And it's like, what's going on? So I went down to 5th, and then I went down to 2nd, and they were the smartest kids I've ever taught. But, you know, they don't have fine motor skills. So my very first day of putting the homework assignment on the board, after they come in for lunch, they start at 1, at 2:45, people still copying off the board. You know, one of my colleagues said, no, you got to run it off on the mimeograph machine and give it to them. You can't expect them to write this down. But having that experience and seeing what was happening across the lifespan, I think has informed my work and helped me to be able to understand a lot of generational differences. I am indeed a baby boomer. But I'm one of them hip baby boomers, right? So I know what y'all mean when y'all say period with the T, okay? I know what y'all talking about. As was mentioned in one of the statements before, is that I've been doing a lot of work in hip hop, which has been really eye-opening to me. You're talking about falling into something. I had no interest in hip hop. I am a Motown girl, okay? With the jazz on the side, you know. But there's certain artists I really, really love, and Christopher Emdin, who is one of my dear friends, asked me to come to participate in the first science battle, Science Genius contest, where we're having kids link hip hop and science. And I was like, Chris, I'm not the right person for this. So he said, well, one of our judges is going to be the Jizza. As in the Wu-Tang Clan. Because I'm knowledgeable, I just don't, He said, yeah. I said, oh, I'll be there. I'll be at that, So it's kind of how I got into it. And then I realized I really am a kind of golden age of hip hop person. I'm the 90s hip hop person. I don't want to hear no panda, panda, panda. Okay? That's not a song, okay? Soulja Boy can't sing, I don't care, okay? So I need you to be saying something, so I'm a conscious hip hop person, right? So I imagine, how many people in the room right now are teaching at any level? Great, perfect. So one of the things I want to make sure that, as I said, we're a more workshop format, so it would seem, weird to be talking about culturally relevant practice and then just stand here and tell it to you, right? That somehow we need to interact in some ways. So one of the things I want you to do is, first of all, remember that you are teaching developing human beings. They're not finished when they get to you. You may know a little bit about the brain development. And that part of the brain that is still growing as students enter our classrooms is that frontal lobe. That's the place where judgment, decision-making, evaluation takes place. Anybody know when where psychologists tell us that that frontal lobe is finished? The age? Somewhere 25, 26, right? Which means most of your undergraduates do not have a fully developed frontal lobe. Case in point. Go to Wisconsin on a weekend, and of course, probably is true of this campus, the weekends start on Thursday, right? But go on a weekend in the middle of the winter where it is below freezing, snow, ice, whatever. And if you drive to the middle of our campus, and we have a city campus, we're not kind of closed off, you literally, the buses and city buses and everything run right through the middle on University Avenue. Drive through that campus, and you will see outside of almost every bar and pub a long line of people in the little jackets or sweatshirts, because nobody wears a coat apparently, waiting to get into a place for beer. That's not smart decision making. My generation ain't gonna wait outside in no below zero for no beer. We going to 7-Eleven. If we lived down here, we would be going to Publix or wherever, get some beer, go home, drink the beer, turn on the Netflix, whatever. We're not going to do that. But if your frontal lobe ain't fully developed, that sounds like a good idea. And I was saying this at lunch to folks, we always have to remember that 13-year-olds can only make 13-year-old decisions. They can't make 18, 19, 20-year-old decisions. 13-year-old decision, I oversleep. I'm late. Okay, I'll go tomorrow. That's what you say when you're 13. When you're 18 or 19, what you might say is, I'm late, I'm missing this first class, but if I hurry, I can get to my next class, and I'll send an email to my first class and see what I need to do. We're wanting that behavior for 8th graders It's not going to happen. It can't happen, and unfortunately, too many of our kids, not from their fault, are being thrust into adult situations where they're supposed to be making decisions that 25 and 30-year-olds, and they can't make it. And they're doing the best they can. So remember, you're working with developing human beings. This is going to be an issue for me. But combined with returning adults. Because those of you who are teaching at the college level, you're not just teaching the typical 18 to 22-year-olds who are like our sweet spot. More and more people are returning to school as adults. People are doing second career things. People who have been laid off of an industry decide, oh, I'll go back to school. People who have been deployed in the armed services are saying, oh, I think I'll go to school, use my GI Bill. So you got an interesting combination of people you serve, people who don't have a fully developed frontal lobe, and people who are mature and have little patience for coping with what it is that these 18 to 22-year-olds. I've taught some methods courses when I was at Wisconsin. I'll have 1 or 2 returning adults and will say to me, I'm not interested in doing no pub crawl. But that's what everybody else wants to do. We want to get a t-shirt, we're going to list all the pubs we make. And I've got an adult saying, I got 3 children at home. What do I look like going to a pub crawl? So the fact that we have this generational diversity is something that we need to pay attention to as we develop these courses we teach. So this all means that you have baby boomers, Generation X, and millennials in one classroom. So your first task is to talk about what does that mean for how you teach. So take a few minutes, talk to the folks at your table. If you've got all these people in your classrooms, what does that mean for how you teach? You may or may not have had an opportunity to share anything. So here's what I'm going to ask. Share with me something you heard said at your table. Not what you said, but what's something you heard? Yes?
I heard someone say that in a K-12 setting, you may have returning adults working with children with underdeveloped frontal lobes. And so the patients in even a K-12 classroom might have some of the same dynamics as
A college classroom.
Yes.
Right, okay. So it's not just merely who the kids are, it's the adults we put in front of those kids and what they seem to know or not know about human development. And I find it really kind of paradoxical that people seem not to know much about human development when it's one of the very first courses you have to take. I know very few teacher ed programs that don't have either child or adolescent development as a part of their program. Okay, somebody else, what did you hear say at your table? Yes?
Someone at my table shared that in order to teach these different generations of people, you have to know what their values are.
So it's very different when you think about, I'm from a generation in which you worked hard, you got credentialed, you got a job, and you could probably keep that job for the rest of your life. My children, for the most part, are Gen Xers. They have no loyalty to the places they work. Why? Because those places don't have no loyalty to them. So my youngest son is a Silicon Valley guy making plenty of money, and I asked him something about his job, and he said, well, I hate this job. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, I can't stand this job. He said, I just work this job because they pay me a lot of money. But it's no connection. And so I grew up with working class parents who worked factories and plants, but they were dedicated to those factories and plants. They worked hard for them. And the fact that I left my job in Philadelphia was like a scandal in my family. because she could have that job for the rest of her life. Why is she leaving that good job? Right? I have people who put in 30 years in the post office. They love their job because their benefits were assured. The company was going to take care of them if they did their job. But you have a generation who doesn't have that experience. Okay, somebody else, something you heard at your table. Yes?
Getting to know their needs.
Okay, important to get to know their needs. One of the things that's always struck me is that when I've had returning adults, they often tend to be more efficient in terms of their work. I've rarely had a returning adult ask me for an extension. But my 20-year-olds, they got so much to do. Can I have another week? But my 45-year-old mom with the 3 kids, her stuff is in on time. So their needs are going to be different, right? I saw a hand over here, yes.
I heard growth versus fixed mindset and self-regulation.
Okay, so this is the work of a colleague from Stanford, Carol Dweck. The idea that we want our kids to grow. We don't decide as they come in the door, you're going to be successful, you're not, you will. We don't make decisions based on how they look, what their background is, what their language is, what their nationality or immigrant status is. None of that has anything to do with people's ability to think and learn. But we tend to have very fixed notions of this. My very first parent-teacher conference as a teacher, the thing that blew me away is that whenever I'd sit down with a parent and share with them what their student was struggling with, and the response would be something like, well, I wasn't ever any good at this, at history myself. And I really wanted to say with my 20-year-old self, I ain't trying to teach you. But I didn't, because I wanted to keep the job. I didn't have tenure yet. But this notion that, well, your mother wasn't good at it, so you can't be good at it. Your dad wasn't any good at that, so you can't. That has nothing to do with it. And in those cultures in which there is a kind of growth mindset, my colleagues from Japan tell me this all the time. They have a little mantra. Sleep 5 hours and fail, sleep 4 hours and pass. In other words, put more effort into it. Give it more time. Okay, so did I get all the hands that I've seen? Yes?
The importance of differentiation and understanding and knowing who you have in front of you to be able to set universal norms that everyone can respond to, and making sure that you know each group, so that communication piece may have to be varied, but everybody's hearing and understanding.
So this question of differentiation, I think it's interesting is that we preach it at the college level, but we don't teach it in the classroom. We tell people about to be teachers that they should differentiate, but we require everybody to do the same thing to pass our classes. That was a problem for me, and so I redid all of my classes, in which essentially there are some things that everybody has to do, sort of my baseline stuff, but then there's a whole bunch of things that you get to choose from. And people do different things because people are good at different things. Some of my students will choose a more artistic rendering of some activity. Some of them will do a more traditional verbal write on paper type thing. Some of them will do a more performative interactive thing. I will accept all of that as a way for you to demonstrate that you understand what it is that we're teaching. So what I actually just did with you is an example of a pedagogical strategy. I didn't ask you to tell me what you said. You know what you said. You had that all fixed in your head in the parking lot, what you was going to say. Okay? I want you to listen to each other. And if you don't listen to each other, you can't share. So when students realize they're going to get rewarded for listening to one another, they're much more likely to do just that. If we're trying to create in a classroom a kind of community in which everybody has some input and impact, you have to do things that reward community-like things. So that's why I said, don't tell me what you said, tell me what you heard. Well, in order for you to have heard something, you had to have listened, right? Okay, let me get everybody standing up. Ooh, Lord, she really ain't playing about making us work, is she? I thought she just was saying that. No, she can. Okay. So we're talking about who's in the classroom and who we are teaching. So I asked you this question. It says how many of you are on. So if you are not on this platform, sit down. If you are not on Facebook, sit down. Okay, y'all doing pretty good so far. If you're not on Twitter, sit down. Oh, now we're starting to separate the wheat from the chaff here. If you're not on Instagram, sit down. Don't pop back up, because you was down before. You don't have Twitter, you got to sit down. I know, but you down. You can't get back up. You're not on Snapchat. Sit down. We're getting kind of thin up in here. If you're not on Hootsuite. I got the Hootsuite back here? All right. I got one person who is out there with where the kids are. Hootsuite is that platform that lets you put them all together. Put all your platforms together so you don't have to go from thing to thing to thing, right? I do this activity because we are essentially living in two different worlds. Our students are in this world over here, and we're in a totally other world, and we don't understand what they're up to, and they don't understand what we're up to. The only reason that I'm on all these platforms is because of students. I wasn't interested in this. I was trying to find a student one day, and I had a very important message for her, and I didn't make sure that I got it to her. But she has a common name. So first I looked for her in our school directory, and there were 5 people with that name. So I said, I can't send this message. It was personal, because I don't know which one is her. So then I searched for her, and I saw something that had, and I saw the picture. I said, oh, that's her. It was Facebook. And then it said, you have to be on Facebook to communicate with her. That's how I got on Facebook. And when I got there and saw what they was doing, oh, Lord. So at my church, I'm like the Facebook police. I'll be like, take this down. Your mama don't want this up here. No. So it's my way to see what's in their world, what they're talking about, what matters to them. And you know that because we have all these different channels and vehicles now, it's not just what comes on the nightly news or what's on a radio show. It's what's out there in cyberspace that they're engaging in. We can know when they are doing dangerous things. Tide Pod Challenge? Really? No, don't do that. Cinnamon Sniffing Challenge? Don't do that. But if you don't know what's out on those platforms, you don't know they're doing this crazy stuff, right? So part of our responsibility, and I tell people all the time who say, oh, I don't want to be bothered with that, make up a fake name, fake identity, You don't have to answer any of this stuff. But this is your one way to monitor, to see what's going on. Okay, so what's your professional Twitter handle? So you're saying, well, I sat down when you had Twitter. No, okay, I'm putting you on Twitter at least virtually for right now. So here's the Twitter handle of my friend Chris Emden. It's Prof at TC, Columbia University, author of For White Folks Who Teach in the Hood, Behind the Magic That Is hashtag Hip Hop Ed, and hashtag Science Genius. So if you were to follow Chris, this is what it's going to say about him. If you were to follow me, and then his handle is at Chris Emden. If you were to follow me, what you're going to find is culturally relevant pedagogy originator, critical race theory and education initiator, 90s hip hop ed OG, at GJ Ladson. What I need you to do, your next task, is write your Twitter handle. Now, some of you already got a Twitter handle, so all you got to do is go to your Twitter handle and say, okay? So go ahead and do that. Somebody tell me your Twitter handle.
Geometry with Miss K.
Geometry with Miss K. That tell me a whole lot about you. You teaching that geometry, girl, ain't you? You got them 10th graders? Ooh, bless you. Bless you. Okay. Somebody else, tell me what your Twitter handle says.
Miss Willis Science.
Say it again.
Miss Willis Science.
Miss Willis Science. You're teaching science. What in science are you teaching?
Middle school.
Middle school. Ooh, bless you for real. Can I tell you that when I decided I would go ahead and be a teacher, I wanted to teach 11th grade U.S. history. For two reasons. Number one, I love U.S. history. That was my specialty. And number two, 11th graders are like the best people on the face of the earth. Ooh, I love 11th grade. Them juniors, ooh, they're the best. Because they get it. 9th graders, come on, y'all. 9th graders are so horrible that when I started teaching, they used to be in the building called the junior high school, 7th, 8th, 9th. And the junior high principals spent their time figuring out, how can we get these people out of our building? Because they are not good people. So they came up with this idea, let's make something called the middle school. We'll take one grade down. We'll take them 6th graders. And then we'll move the 9th graders over to the high school. Well, then the high school people end up with the 9th graders. And they can't stand them. And I was actually in a high school in Indianapolis, and the principal said to me, oh, would you like to see my freshman center? I said, you got them in a whole separate building? That's how much people don't want to have them, right? They'll build a building for 9th graders. The 10th graders are a tough grade because that's the grade of highest dropout. Track the data. Kids have spent that freshman year and decided, you know, I'm not coming back. It's not for me. 12th graders are like a hologram. It's like you see somebody there. Oh, but they're not there. They're not there. They on to the next thing. And now that we in 2nd semester, 12th grade, oh, they truly crazy. Because they'll tell you to your face, well, you can't do nothing to me. I already got my college acceptance. I'm going to the University of South Florida. You're an idiot. You don't have a fully developed frontal lobe. What you don't understand is they still have telephones at the University of South Florida. I could call them. I can let them know you're not a very nice person. But they're just out there. But 11th grade, oh, these people have got it together. Because now they done figured out this thing is real. They ain't playing. I got to join some clubs. Every club got a lot of juniors in it, right? I joined some clubs. Because I got to get my resume together because I'm going to apply to school next year. I got to take the ACT or the SAT. I got to pull it together. I love the 11th graders. The problem is, so does everybody. So my struggle was, as a new teacher, I couldn't get an 11th grade job. And because my certification was in U.S. history, they had to find where else in the curriculum the U.S. history would be, and it turned out to be 8th grade. And I tell you, 11th graders were the best people in the face of the earth. 8th graders are the worst. Worse than 9th. Worse. Where's my Miss Science person at? Miss Science, where are you? This Miss Science. You know about metamorphosis, right? In biology. 8th graders are at the larvae stage. The absolute ugliest stage of development. It's necessary, but it's ugly. It's ugly. You in a room with midget men and Amazon women. Y'all tell me if I'm lying. She gonna come up to you with 2 pigtails, a face full of pimples, and a 38 double D bra, and you're like, oh, Jesus. What is this? They're not an attractive group of people. I have 4 kids of my own. I didn't even look at them in 8th grade. I sit at the dinner table like this. Ooh, I don't want to look at that. Now, here's what I know, because we're talking metamorphosis. They are going to become butterflies. They're going to become beautiful. It just ain't going to happen in 8th grade. It's going to happen in 11th grade. They're going to be, ooh, you're going to be like, oh my God, look at your mom. Oh, look at him. Look at Roshan, ain't she cute? I mean, it's going to all come together in 11th grade. So me having to be in that classroom with them forced me to learn a lot more about human development than I thought I had to know. And so we want to think about, that Twitter handle may sometimes give us a key to who you see yourself as. Anybody else got a Twitter handle? Yes.
It says, hello, I like teaching babies.
Hello, I like Chi-Chi babies. Okay. So that tells you something about her interests. So we all can develop a Twitter handle, but the other thing we have to develop is what the kids call swag. Y'all know what swag is? What's swag? Stuff we all get, okay? That's what the swag is at the university. They give you a whole little bag full of stuff, okay? But there's another thing that swag is. My students say I'm swagalicious. Okay, what's swag?
It's a way of being you that nobody else can be.
There you go. There you go. And some people have swag, and some people ain't got swag. You be like, whoa. This is not a political statement. Barack Obama has swag, I'm sorry. I don't care what you feel about, I don't care about your politics. This is a dude that come off of Air Force One and he don't hold on to the thing, right? He walk out of the thing like, with the thing, got swag, right? Look at certain athletes, they have swag, right? It's talking about how you carry yourself. But I'm going to use swag a little differently. I'm going to use swag to talk about your strengths, to talk about your work in progress, what you're still working on, to talk about your accomplishments, what you've done to date, and to talk about your goals. So think about, we're going to test your swag. I want you to select somebody that you haven't met. So up to now, you've been talking to people at your table. But I want you to select somebody you haven't met, and you're going to have 60 seconds each, so we're talking 2 minutes, to tell them your strengths. What are the things you're really, really good at? Your work in progress. What's the stuff I need to work on? Your accomplishments. What's the greatest thing you've accomplished to date? And your goals. What's the next thing you want to accomplish? Okay, so you got to get up, go meet somebody, different table, and get through those 4 things in 60 seconds. The tone of the room drastically changed when I gave you that task, right? As a teacher, you've got to be comfortable with the kind of noise that interactive activities require. Our kids will never learn how to speak in the tones that we want them to speak if we don't give them practice. So you let them talk to one another. Also, y'all took these selfies now. Don't post them unless the person say they okay with you posting them. Some of these people in the witness protection, they don't, you know. So all of these people ain't paid all of their bills. They don't, you know, so. But I also ask you to do something that for our kids is second nature, right? And I can't remember whether I have this in this presentation or not, but this is one of the most significant tools of our era. And we need to teach our kids how to use them and use them responsibly instead of banning them, collecting them, putting them in a box, put them up in the little shoe thing up there. If my grandchildren are in school and there's an active shooter and they don't have access to this, oh, somebody's gonna lose their job over this. Because I wanna know that they're safe. You would have been insulted if coming in this room I had said, leave your phone in the box on the table. There are places where you shouldn't use a phone, okay? On the Senate floor, okay, during an impeachment hearing, no, you shouldn't have your phone. And that was the rule. But that was true for everybody. And then some people still snuck their phones in there anyway, so. But we have to teach our kids how to integrate these technologies. And the reason why we don't want them used is we're not using them effectively. Why should they be a click away from more information than you could ever give them? Because you don't want them used. Now here's what people tell me. Here's the main reason. If I asked y'all, y'all would tell me this. Oh, I don't want them to do it because it's a distraction. They kids. Their life is a distraction. When I go to single gender schools, why don't you have a co-ed school? Oh, because having girls would be a distraction. I mean, everything is a distraction for people who don't have fully developed frontal lobes. So rather than focus on it being a distraction, teach them how to integrate it. One of the things that I have my students do, my undergraduates, and they're so good at this, when I have them do reading assignments, I ask them to give me a tweet on the reading. They pull them phones off, knock that tweet out, and I have a hashtag for all my courses. And so I have a smart board in there. We can see all the tweets. It's actually really good for my international students who don't like to speak in class, because that's not their tradition. They're used to just listening. But they can participate and interact. So we've got to become a little bit more sophisticated over the use of technologies and not just say, ban them, okay? That was my little commercial. So one of the things that our students need to know is that they belong. That's the thing that students are craving, a sense of belonging. Do I belong here? When students are struggling because their first language is not English, they're struggling because they have a documented disability, they often feel like, well, I don't belong. If they're concerned because of their immigrant status, feel like I don't belong. Everything y'all do make me feel like I don't belong. And so one of the first things that, if you want to call yourself culturally relevant, you're trying to figure out ways, how do I get students to understand they belong? They have a right to be here. So often when I'm sending students to student support services, on our campus at Wisconsin, it's called the McBurney Center. And that's where you go if you have a documented disability and you need help. And a lot of times students don't want to do that, because it makes them feel like I'm less than. I tell them over and over again, when you look at your bill for your tuition, room and board, and fees, let me tell you what's in them fees. The McBurney Center. You paying for it, but you don't want to use it. The Writing Center. We have one of the best writing centers in the country. You don't want to use it? So literally helping students understand, you belong here. We have things in place for people who have your concern to let you know you belong here. You fit. So let's talk a little bit more about teaching. And there's a view of teaching in many schools and colleges. For those of you who are teaching at the collegiate level, we don't require any form of pedagogical training for professors, for lecturers, or TAs. That's why some of the worst teaching you ever experienced happened in college. Because the university doesn't require them to be certified as teachers. They're like, you just need to know physics because you're teaching physics. But we all know there's a difference between knowing something and teaching it. And excellent teaching rarely overrules satisfactory research or scholarship, administration or service. But the reverse could be true. In other words, you could be a great teacher, at least at the college and university level. But if your scholarship is not top flight, they're not going to give you a job for life. You're not going to earn tenure. And that's sort of the rules of the road, name of the game. And because the college reward system, because of that system, few of our colleagues put any energy in a pedagogical improvement. That's why you go into a college course and you're like, God, this is so dull. This guy been here how long? Because he's not getting rewarded to teach. He's getting rewarded for other stuff. College teaching is overwhelmingly lecture-based. That's only one way to learn. And the sad part about it is we have research that suggests we start lecturing students as young as 3rd grade. I don't know about you, but I can't remember half the stuff my parents told me, and I love them. So why am I going to listen to you? Drone on and on. Lecture is it's efficient because you can cover a lot of material, but it's ineffective because people don't take much of that with them. There's an ongoing myth that knowledge of subject matter is preparation enough for teaching. And many of our states are now participating in certification schemes that suggest, oh, you don't need to have a teacher education background. You used to be a biologist, come teach biology. You were a writer, come be an English teacher. That's not true. There are different ways in which we handle the pedagogy. For example, take something like Mark Twain. Mark Twain shows up across the curriculum. Somewhere in middle school, Mark Twain is there in a story called Tom Sawyer. Mark Twain shows up in high school in a book called Huckleberry Finn. He shows up in college with like short stories, Jumping Frogs of Calaveras County, what have you. And as a graduate student, you could just have a whole course that's just on Mark Twain. But you cannot teach 5th graders the way you would teach graduate students to appreciate Mark Twain. So it's the same material, but pedagogically, you have an obligation to adjust it to meet the needs of the learners who are in front of you. This is a true statement. Why do I even have to go if the only thing he's going to do is present the PowerPoint slides that come with the textbook? That's what a college student said to me. Why am I even going to class? All he's going to do is show the same slides that come with the textbook. If I go to the textbook site, I can get each of these slides. In other words, what the student is telling me, I'm not really being taught. I'm just listening to somebody read the slides. So I think most teachers, whether they are college or PK-12, want to be better teachers. I think the reason you're here is because you want to be better. But often they don't have a repertoire of teaching strategies. They don't know what else they could do. So one of the tasks that I have my students do is I send them out to classes across the university and other places, and I say, I want you to go look at teaching in some other setting. And then come back and tell us what you noticed about what that teacher did. And one year, one of my graduate students, and you know, they go to the med school, the law school, they go to the business school, some of them go over to athletics, they go to coaching, they go to community things like Tai Chi or yoga. I don't really care what the subject is, I'm just interested that teaching is going on and that they need to talk about what they noticed about the teaching. So this one student one year went to the med school and she went to the cadaver lab. And she went on the day that the lab was on the renal system. And what she noticed is that the students were in groups of 8, each around a cadaver. And 2 of the students, she learned, in each group had already come to the lab a few days before and been taught the lab by the teacher, by the professor. Their job was to teach the lab to the 6 members of their group. And she said what was striking is how dogged and determined these student teachers were. And so they would say things like, now do you get it? Do you really understand it? Oh, I don't think you get it. Start over again. And we just kept making student by student go through each and everything. And she said, I couldn't figure out why they were so hard on their classmates. She said, till I learned that the professor, who was in the lab, but he wasn't teaching, it was a professor and a mortician in the lab, they were just walking around, and they could answer questions if students said. She said, until I found out that the teacher's perspective, or the professor's strategy was, at the end of the lab, he was going to choose 2 of the students from the lab, not the 2 he had taught, but 2 in that group of 6, to take the lab exam for the group. And the students' average score, not the best score, their scores are going to be averaged and given to all 8 students. Now let's think about what the med school is trying to accomplish here. They don't really care about how much material the professor covers. What they care about are these people competent enough to be able to treat human beings for a life or death situation like kidney failure, right? I don't know about you, but if I have kidney disease, I don't want the person that got the C on the lab. I want a maximally competent person. And that's really what this professor was driving at. It's not about me getting up and saying, well, I covered this, this, and this. It's about, I know these students know the renal system, right? So that's a different strategy than just standing there lecturing to students about something. Yes, lecture is a way of teaching. But can I tell you that Most people are not good lecturers. I'm not a good lecturer. It's one of the reasons why I have tried to do so much variety in my teaching. I can't just stand there and talk to you. I need you to engage in stuff and try some other things to learn things. But there are that few group of teachers who are brilliant and can stand up and lecture. There are people who know how to do a Socratic dialogue. How do you get the back and forth with students? There are others who know how to conduct a discussion. And the discussion is not merely asking kids a question. We have pretty good research to suggest that most teachers are not good at discussions. Most teachers treat a discussion like a tennis match. They hit the question out, and somebody hit it back to them. They hit out another question, they hit it back. Pushing the sports metaphor, instead of a tennis match, a discussion is more like a volleyball match. The question gets hit out, and it doesn't come back until at least 3 people have touched it, right? It goes from one to the other. And so this idea that you want more participation in a discussion, not merely can you answer all my questions. And then of course, there are demonstrations. You can demonstrate something to students so that they kind of get what you're trying to help them understand. And there are student-led sessions where it's not you standing up there at all. It's the students leading what's going on. And more recently, I've come to really enjoy technology enhanced. So rather than tell my students about culturally relevant teaching, one of the things I do is I Skype in teachers who I know are culturally relevant. And I have them talk to my students about what they're doing, about what things are exciting things they're engaged in right now. So there's lots of other ways to teach. And so I wonder what kind of teaching you've experienced. See, there are teachers who choose not to teach. They're getting paid, but they're not really teaching. There are those students who, those teachers who do what I call teaching at. They're just talking at the students. And then finally, there are those teachers who are willing to both teach and learn with students. And that's really, I think, what should be your goal. So let me give you an example of each. Let me show you what it looks like to be in a classroom when the teacher is not teaching. And that's a clip from a very funny movie called Teachers, with a very young Nick Nolte. But this man doesn't teach anything. He just has stacks of dittos, which is why he, you know, the lady said, she said, Mr. Skiles, he said, who? You know, ditto. That's who they know him as. He isn't doing any teaching. The kids fill out the sheets each day. He sits back there and reads his paper. But he's gotten awards because his class is orderly. He's not being rewarded for teaching. It's that he done got the kids under control. And some of you may work in buildings where that's the reward. Not to teach, but the kids, you ain't sending nobody to the office. You know, that you don't cause any disruption. The teachers that I studied in the Dream Keepers often were those kind of teachers that they didn't send anybody to the office. They were good teachers, but they were also being rewarded for the fact that they didn't involve the principal in the management of their classes. While teaching in middle school, I had a principal come to see me at the end of the year, and he said, you know, we have a problem. I said, what's the problem? He said, you haven't referred any kids, you haven't suspended anybody. I said, that's a problem? He said, well, yeah, you know, we have a lot of suspensions. You know, this is a rough community. You have no suspensions. I said, well, actually, that's not true. I said, I don't have any referrals. He said, well, what do you mean? What are you talking about? I said, if I refer them, then you get to do with them what you want to do. And often what you want to do is send them home, where back in the day, they can go watch cartoons. And I'm like, I like cartoons as much as anybody. I like the Road Runner, Wile E. Coyote. I like all of that, right? If anybody should go home, it should be me. 'Cause I'm in here working hard. I said, so I don't abdicate my responsibility and let you do it. I said, but I suspend them. What do you mean? How do you suspend them? I said, in your terms, suspension is that kids are spending less time here. I said, my term is just the opposite. If I suspend you, you're going to spend more time here. I'm going to come and get you in the morning. I'm one of the first teachers here. So you're probably going to start your day around 7:30 because I'm coming by your house to get you. I'm letting your mother know you suspended in school with me. So not only am I bringing you to school, you're going to spend your breaks with me. Lunchtime, you better bring that lunch tray back up here. If you don't, I'm coming to the lunchroom in front of you and your boys. And they're going to say, man, what's she doing here? And I'm going to say, tell them. Tell them. Me and you got lunch dates for the next 2 days. Nobody wants that. And you're going to have a longer day than everybody because I don't go home at the bell. So you're going to be from 7:30 to 5 dealing with me. I don't have many repeat offenders. Nobody wants to spend that much time. My husband don't want to spend that much time with me, right? So the idea is rather than push kids, remember I talked about making kids understand they belong? Rather than pushing them away, I'm going to bring them in. I'm going to bring them in. We're going to spend more time together. You need to understand that I care enough about you to not push you out of this, because this is important for you. So that was not teaching. Okay, teaching at, it'll be a familiar clip. That's the late great Ben Stein in the classic Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He's teaching, but nobody's really learning anything. There's no interaction. There's no recognition that the kids are totally stymied by what, it's as if he's speaking a foreign language to them. And he's not taking any time to check for understanding. He's just asking questions and answering them as fast as he answers, as he asks them. But all is not lost. I do want to show you an example of teaching and learning with. That's an actual teacher. That's not a film teacher. That is the late, great Harriet Ball. Have you ever heard of KIPP schools? They stole all the Harriet stuff. The people who first developed them were in a school with her. And they couldn't get the kids to do anything, and her kids were soaring. And they asked her if they could observe her. And so this is an example of her teaching the kids the metric system. And you see she's using something very familiar with them, sort of rhythm and the music, and there's the call and response, the interaction. It fits what they're used to experiencing in a cultural context. That was an elementary one. Let me give you a high school example of teaching and learning with. So Lisa's one of our Teaching Tolerance Award winners. One of the great things about being on that panel, selecting those teachers, is I got to go in those classrooms and see these teachers. We can only show you so much on a video clip, but just the interaction with these kids and her way of making them feel important and what they bring to the class as an important component of the class makes her just a stellar teacher. So in addition to varying our teaching strategies, we have to consider who the students are. Gender. Gender matters. We're in a very gendered society. We say certain things are for certain, but even if we are wrong about the way we've divided kids up, they experience that division. And so we have to understand, if you're in a classroom in which most of the kids are of one gender, and you just have a few kids of another, that you have to help support those kids in that classroom to remind them of the ducks. You belong here. You may be one of 3 girls in this pre-calc class, so what? You belong here. I'm going to make sure you understand that you belong here. I'm not going to make constant references that link to basketball or football. I'm going to talk about a lot of different things so that you can figure out where you fit in. We have to consider who they are racially and ethnically. It matters. Where kids feel like they've been made to feel invisible. You don't see me. You don't understand that here I am, the only student of this background, and you act as if that doesn't matter to me. That's weighing on my mind while I'm in here. Do you see me a particular way because of my race or ethnicity? Whether they are a second language learner. This is the only society that I know where knowing more is treated like knowing less. Most high schools I go to have world language courses, but they don't have native speakers help with the conversation part of it. So if I go to a school and your school offers Spanish as a world language offering, and you have Spanish speakers in your school, not necessarily in your class, but they're in the school, why wouldn't you tap them to help your students who are learning the language pronounce things correctly? I'm not asking you to have them be grammar folks. I won't have English people be grammar folks, right? But they know it's not como está usted. No, it's not how you say it. It's como está usted. That they have an ear for how it ought to sound. But we almost never put our ELL students together with world language students who are trying to learn a language that they have mastered. Some of our students are international students. They've come from somewhere else. Their experience is different. Stuff that you take for granted that kids ought to know because they're in the United States, they may not know. They may not know. One of my favorite 4th of July was spent in the UK. Wasn't nobody setting off no fireworks. Then nobody cared nothing about it. And I saw in the park a group of expats, Americans, who were having a picnic. And I said, what are y'all doing? We having a 4th of July celebration. For what? What y'all have 4th of July for? It matters to us. Oh, really? So it's important for us to know that people who have an international experience are going to have other experiences to bring to the classroom. We have kids who are economically challenged. They can't afford everything. And so I've been on this big rant, and I shared this with some folks down in Bradenton last Saturday at a talk. I don't want to see classrooms where kids are being rewarded for what they have versus what they know. And all the teachers are going to get mad at me on this, but I'm sorry. I think I'm so anti-homework at this point. I don't see why you sign it. And I've heard the rationales. But here's the deal. You're assigning something and giving it value, but you don't directly supervise it. Right? So here's my question. How do you know who did the homework? I've done a lot of homework in my day. I got 4 kids. I've done a lot of homework. Told my kids, I said, I've been to high school now 5 times, and I ain't like it but the first time. That's the only time I liked it. So, you know, you get those kids who, they turn in this brilliant, beautiful homework, but test time they don't do well. Why? Because they don't do it's not them doing the homework. It's some over-anxious parent who wants you to get an A on everything doing your homework for you. The other thing is that sometimes we ask kids to do things, again, that represents what they have and not what they know. And it's not fair, because what you really want to know is, do you understand something? This is my favorite example of this. My daughter was in 6th grade. She was in a mathematics class that was using a curriculum called Math in Context. Great curriculum. I don't have anything negative to say about the curriculum. In fact, I shouldn't, because one of my colleagues developed the curriculum, right? But the idea was to get the kids to do more practical applications of mathematics. The task was, in this particular instance, is that the kids had to build a toothpick bridge. out of 100 toothpicks that was sturdy enough to hold their math book. Okay? Sound like a great idea, right? And the teachers gave all of the kids a little baggie with 100 toothpicks. So that's how they felt they had met the equity demand. Everybody got 100 toothpicks. Well, number one, I got 250 in a box at home. Okay, so now I'm already a bridge up on you. I can make me a prototype, right? Trust me, the prototype did come into being. But more than that, a toothpick bridge is not about the toothpicks. It's about a hot glue gun. And if you ain't got no hot glue gun, you ain't making no toothpick bridge. You cannot make a toothpick bridge with Elmer's. It ain't gonna hold. So here's my daughter calling me at work, Mom, can you stop at Joann Fabrics and get a hot glue gun because I gotta make this toothpick bridge? Sure. I'll go to Joann Fabrics, the lady teach me how to use this thing, because you know, I'm not very crafty. I'm gonna burn everything up if you don't teach me how to do this. Them things is hot, you know. I can do this. But my daughter is sitting in a classroom with some kids who, if they make that same phone call, the mother says, not today, sweetie, maybe Friday when I get paid. But the task, it has to get done tonight. So even though I know how to do this, I don't have the tools and I can't get them in time to do it. Now that's bad enough, but then my daughter comes home, I come home with the toothpick bridge. My daughter is much younger than her siblings, hence my head is white like this, right? There's 17 years between her and her next sibling. Yeah, oh my God, that's right. That's right. And so she comes home to a household with 2 college-educated parents. Only child at home. Mother works at the university. A university that has a college of engineering. Mama knows some of the engineering professors. Yo, Dub. How you do this thing? What's going on here? And we got high-speed internet. We got all of this. And so sure enough, we made the first bridge. That didn't come out so good. You know, then we got some more internet information, and now we've made the second one. Now really, what you want to know, you know, the bottom line on this thing is that kids begin to understand that triangles are reinforcing structures. That's what you want to know that they understand. And it's a fun way to do it. Except, like I said, you've got this inequity built in because some people can't put this together. So we finally get it done. It's late. I tell my daughter, okay, listen, go upstairs, go to bed, because your bus is going to come early, and you know, you got to get the bus early tomorrow morning. And my husband says, bus? Well, you ain't taking my toothpick bridge on no bus. Why? Because he knows it's going to be another bunch of 6th graders on there who are going to say, let me see yours, let me see yours. And it's a toothpick bridge, folks. It's not a concrete bridge. What's likely to happen between the bus stop and school is that there ain't going to be no bridge. So now we're talking about having a parent with the flexibility in his schedule to say, I'm going to drive you, which he does. So that afternoon, that evening when I came home, I asked my husband, I said, how did it go? He said, oh, it was fine. He said, but you know, some people had theirs on a board. Some people had some little trees and some little cars. You know, we could have done that. Okay, now all of a sudden, like whose assignment is this? That's what I mean about, and you know, teachers are human beings. They can look at the aesthetics. They're going to be impressed about, ooh, we got a little tree. Ooh, we got some Hot Wheels on here. They're going to see all this. And I shared this with the teachers because I was a part of the parent equity team. And they said, well, we did what we could to make it equitable. How could it have been more equitable? We gave everybody 100 toothpicks. I said, listen, if you really want to know, do kids understand what this is about, they need to make those bridges here. You need to have a bank of hot glue guns. And kids need to take their turn at their designs and putting them together. Then you'll know that they know. But what you know right now is that some kids got a lot of resources and were able to pull that off. And some kids that you think that you've given a 0 to because they came with no bridge, they might actually know how to do this, but didn't have those resources. So that economic challenge can be a real one. And clearly you're going to have some students with a disability. One of the things that I say to students all the time now who give me this, oh, I wasn't prepared to teach these children. What are the children you were prepared to teach? My perspective is that everyone is a teacher of children with special needs. Everyone. I don't care if you have the designation or not. I don't care if you got the certification or not. Kids are going to come in with special needs. Everyone is an English language learner teacher. Everyone. Whether you've been designated, whether you have skills or not, you're going to have students that you have to face whose first language is not English. And so rather than say, I'm not prepared to teach them, or to quote, not teach them, there are some things that you have to learn about whoever walks into that classroom. And there are perhaps some other things that you want to look at when you think about who the students are. I also want to point out that teaching is more than delivery. It's not just telling people stuff. It's not just, giving them information. And I think we limit our assessment to paper and pencil tests. We think that's the be-all, end-all. The term papers, you got to write a paper, or the projects. What I'm suggesting is that it could be exhibition. Kids could show you something that they can do. It could be portfolios. You could have kids collecting and assembling information over the course of a semester. It could be artistic renderings. I used to have a student in a class, teach an undergraduate class called Hip Hop and Education. And I had a student at every class setting. He wasn't taking notes, he was drawing. And he would draw me a graph piece for every lecture or every discussion that we had. And I've kept them. Because what he was saying to me is, I'm engaged, but I'm engaged in a different way. I'm not going to sit here and take notes. It could be something that's technology enhanced, whether it's videos or games. It could be a poster, or it could be a curriculum project. One of the things that I ask my students to do, one of the choices they have is they can do a syllabus. If you were in charge of this course, what would you have in it? What things would you want people to read? What kinds of assessments would you have students do? So I want to give you an example of a different kind of assessment, and it's back to our work with Science Genius in New York. But that's Jabari Johnson, and when we met Jabari said he was not college material. But we worked with Jabari over the year. Any of the physics folks in here know that the physics is correct in that. FD equals W. The unit measurement of the product is called joules. All these sort of mundane facts. He figured out a way to put it in something that was his passion and won this contest. When we left, Jabari was convinced, you know what, maybe I can go to college. And he applied to Hunter College in New York, got in. He's now a graduate of Hunter College. And in the meantime, he has come back to his high school to coach the next generation of kids every year for the Science Genius battles. We have had all kinds of kids. I think the second year we had a group of Muslim girls who were amazing. Because I know a lot of times when people think of hip hop and rap, they think it's very male dominated, but here were these young ladies who won the citywide contest. We want kids to learn things, but we don't want them to lose their souls in the midst of it. And this is a thing that I think we really tried to demonstrate with the Science Genius. Looking at how's my time? How am I doing? Okay. Okay, all right, don't want to be too, I don't want to go over what y'all want me to do now. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about my own work. My work is focused on theorizing pedagogy. I want to theorize practice, which sounds kind of weird because we think of theory and practice as two separate things. But the truth of the matter is, as my late advisor, one of my advisors, Elliot Eisner at Stanford, would say, there's nothing so practical as a good theory. That when we have a way to think about how things work, then we better understand how they work. And so without strong theory, I argue it's difficult to strengthen our practice. What's driving our practice? And I began by looking at those teachers who were successful with the least successful students. What is it that they are doing that we can learn from? And it helped me to develop a theoretical model for this pedagogy. Some of you will know this work either from the book The Dream Keepers, or if you read the more theoretical stuff in the American Educational Research Journal, Towards the Theory of Culturally Relevant Pedagogy. So what is that? Well, it's a pedagogy that empowers students intellectually, socially, emotionally, and politically by using cultural reference to impart knowledge, skills, and attitudes. These cultural references are not merely vehicles for bridging or explaining the dominant culture. They are aspects of the curriculum in their own right. So I tell folks all the time, I'm not trying to get you to use hip-hop, okay? I don't want you to dangle hip-hop as a little toy that kids will, the shiny thing for them to go after. I want you to learn how to be hip-hop, which is really very different. So, talking about culturally relevant pedagogy, hopefully that's an equilateral triangle. If it's not, y'all blame Microsoft. So I don't make these shapes in these programs. But I want it to be equilateral because all three of these things are important. Equal angles, equal sides, equal angles. The first being academic achievement or student learning. I've kind of moved away from just focusing on academic achievement, because when you say that, people think test scores. I'm talking student learning. What do kids learn? Someone back here at an earlier activity said a growth mindset. What did kids know when they came to me in September? And what do they now know as we approach the end of the school year? That's student learning, okay? The second component is this notion of cultural competence, and I'm going to talk about what I mean by that. It's one of those terms that I think is right now being misused. We hear it all the time. We now have culturally competent nursing, we have culturally competent counseling, we have culturally competent policing. Really? Okay. And then the third thing is what I've called socio-political consciousness. And this is the idea that what you learn in school can help you make change outside of school. You're concerned that the dress code is unequally applied. What skills have you learned in school to address this? Rather than sit and just be mad about it. Is there a letter you can write to a school board member? Is there a presentation you can make before the school board? Oh, have you learned anything in math about getting surveys and statistics so you can literally find out and tell the school board, this is how students in our school feel about this dress code policy? So, if you don't have all three of those, in my mind, you are not doing culturally relevant pedagogy. I think the supporting student learning is one that we know we're supposed to do that, our jobs require it. But we have an argument over depth versus coverage. And as a social studies teacher, trust me, it's an enduring thing for us, how I'm supposed to start at the age of exploration and end up with the election of Donald Trump. Can't happen. Cannot happen. So I've got to make some decisions about what are the enduring themes of American history that we can delve deeply into. And then we have people who have this notion that if a lot of people are failing, then it's a rigorous course. So I had this problem where when I was a department chair, and I was chair in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction, where we actually, our teacher ed candidates get their degree from our department. Got a call from a reporter because he said, that I had the highest grade point average on the campus. I'm like, yeah, hey, that's good. Oh, no, it's not. I'm like, what? He said, because people think that you guys are not rigorous. Really? So he wanted to do this interview with me, and so he said, yeah, you got this high grade point average, and don't think you're teaching, you're not rigorous enough. You're not demanding enough of the students. So I said to him, he had all this data on my department. I said, you look through your data, tell me how many freshmen are in my department. The answer is 0, because we don't accept freshmen. They have to take general courses. I said, how many sophomores are in my department? I think he found 4. I said, I don't know how they got in here. It must be advanced, because we really don't take them until they get all of their general requirements. And these may be some sophomores that went to summer school, got some courses, and were able to get in. I have an entire department of juniors and seniors who have proven to the university that they can do college level work because they successfully gotten through those first 2 years. Why wouldn't they be A and B students? Trust me, my own kids, if you're a junior and you're getting a D, you need to come home. Because you're supposed to be in your major by now, in the thing you chose, in following your passion. So the reporter said to me, well, the math department has the lowest grade point average. I said, why am I not surprised? First and foremost, half of the people in the math department don't want to be there. The university requires those freshmen and sophomores to take these Quant A, Quant B requirements. They don't want to be there. I got all people who want to be with me. So no, I'm not going to apologize because my students are performing well, and I'm certainly not going to suggest that we're not being rigorous with them. I have the best of all possible worlds. How many people are failing in the med school? Probably none. Because what it took to get there is essentially someone who is focused on this thing and has learned to love this thing. So I don't go by this notion that the high failure rate is the same as being rigorous. Side note, at the end of the conversation with this reporter, what I learned is that he had applied to the School of Ed and didn't get in. It was rigorous enough for you. Yeah. What I know is that we have been in a model where we've treated our courses like they're sieves. That you kind of take them all in, and then whoever makes it through on the other side, we're calling that success. And I'm saying if you're going to be culturally relevant, you got to treat this work like a net. The idea is that you want to catch everybody. You are teaching for mastery. Mastery. We want students to come away with it. And I have a picture, and I already told you this story about the cadaver lab, about the idea that here were these faculty teaching for mastery. They want people to know the renal system, not stretch out and say, here are my C students, here are my D students. I want to leave with all A students because this is that important. Cultural competence is that second component, and it means to be firmly grounded in your own culture of origin and fluent in at least one other culture. That's what I mean by cultural competence. So for most students of color, it's having that pride of their own culture. It means that they learn their first language. It means that they learn their history and their traditions. And then they also learn whatever we're calling mainstream culture. But this component doesn't let white students off the hook. They need to become culturally competent. Everybody is not going to stay in their one little community for the rest of their life. We are in a global, technologically interconnected world. So our students are going to interact with people who are very different from them. So I have to share this story with my youngest son, who is, all my kids have their own talents, but my youngest one's talent is he is what school called too social. That's a nice way of saying he talked too much, right? He too social, which, you know, you don't tell an anthropologist their child is too social. That doesn't make any sense to me. That to me is like saying that an ant is too social. You know, you need to go build your colony by yourself. No, your very nature is to be social. And so every report card I had of this kid has something to the effect that he was too social. He could do so much better if he weren't so social. You know, he need to focus, he too social. So after getting yet another note home about his sociability, I go up to the high school to meet with his counselor. And how many high school folks I have here? Raise your hand if you're high school. Great. Most high schools have, the kids create something called a click map. Whether you know it or not, they have like a grid or a legend for where you hang out depending on who you hang with. And at his high school, the student newspaper published the click map. Because the kids all hang in this, it's a California school, so their cafeteria is really outdoors. It's got a roof, but no walls, right? They call it the bat cave. And the kids of different groups sit in different places. And so here was this map with a legend showing you where everybody sits. So I go to have a meeting with my son's counselor, and I grab the paper, and when I'm sitting there listening to what she's saying about what his teachers are saying, and I said, you know, I couldn't help but notice that the school newspaper has published this click map. I said, can you tell me where Kevin fits on the map? So she looked at the map, and her first response was, oh, well, you know, I've seen him with the jocks. I said, well, he's on the football team. Well, I've seen him with the tech geeks. He loves technology. I've seen him with the drama kids. He's a very dramatic young man. We go from group to group to group. And my kids touched every group. At one point she said, you might not want to hear this, but you know, I seen him with the stoners. I'm like, yep. That would be my kid. There was not one group at this high school that my kid didn't interact with. And it was a problem for the school because he's too social. But let's fast forward. He graduates from high school, goes to college, graduates from college, and he gets his first job that fits with what he studied. He's in the tech world, works in Silicon Valley, and what is his job? Communication between upper management and the people in the clean rooms in those little white, those Tyvek suits, they call them bunny suits, right? Because can't nobody talk to everybody like Kevin can. His client list is Korea, Japan, China, Taiwan, Germany, and France. And I said to him, I said, Kevin, you know, I know you don't know all these languages. I know you study some German, but you know, how are you able to communicate with all these people? He said, well, Mom, you gotta be willing to listen to people. You gotta hear what they have to say. He said, when I go to Germany, Hans and Franz ain't playing. They're like, Herr Kevin, we must do this now, today, right now. He said, but when I slide over to France, he said, Jock be all like, oh, Kevin, you work too hard. Let us have another glass of wine. He said, if I go into those work sites with only my agenda, I may lose a client. If I lose a client, we lose money. If we lose money, I lose my job. So the very thing that school didn't like about this kid, that he was culturally competent, is what pays his bills for him. So that's what I mean by cultural competence. It's not, you don't have to teach my son Black English. He learned that at home. But you can't denigrate it. You can't tell him that it's bad English or corruption. or any of that, because he knows his mother is not going to stand for that. It's the language of his grandparents. But he also needs to learn other cultures. The problem is, how are we going to have culturally competent students when we don't have culturally competent teachers? That's our struggle. The third thing is the socio-political consciousness. This is a quote from Thomas Jefferson, and he says, "Above all things, I hope the education of the common people will be attended to, convinced that on their good sense we may rely with the most security for the preservation of a due degree of liberty." We can't maintain democracy without engaged citizenry. And one of the reasons why I think we are in such a polarized place right now, this is not a political, it's not a partisan statement, it's a political statement, is that we're too tired and overworked to engage in citizen action. We worked all day, we don't feel like going to no board meetings. We work all week, we don't want to be on no civic committees. But this is so important. And when I say socio-political consciousness, I'm not talking about teachers coming up with problems that they want kids to solve. I'm talking about kids saying, "Hey, teacher, this is a problem." And you saying, "Well, what do you want to do about it?" And helping them create the strategies. And what might be a kid problem may not necessarily be a big thing for us. I've been in schools where the only problems that people are working on are things that teachers came up with. I say to kids, "What are y'all working on?" "Always saving the rainforest." "Really?" "Why?" That's what she want to do. "Where is the rainforest?" "I don't know." So to the degree that we are creating problems for kids, that's not socio-political consciousness. Here's a socio-political consciousness. How come they keep serving this whack A liver in the cafeteria? Don't nobody like this. Okay, that's not a problem for me because I'm not eating it. But if this is the only meal you're going to have for that day, or the only hot meal you're going to have that day, then you want to do something about it. So what can you do? Now it's time for you to do your surveys. It's time for you to be able to measure how much food is being wasted because people are not eating this. What what can you take to the school board and to food services to show them this is not a good decision to keep serving this particular meal because nobody likes this? That's what I mean by socio-political conscience, that it's a kid problem that they decide to work on. I want to share with you an example of a colleague by the name of Youre. Youre is now at the University of Texas, but for many years he was at the University of California, Berkeley. And his real question was, why were the black students struggling in the calc course for non-engineering majors at UC Berkeley? He taught the calculus course for non-engineering majors. And he said, one of the things I noticed is that my black students were struggling, and I had a lot of Chinese students, Mandarin-speaking Chinese students, and we can have that kind of differentiation in the Bay Area, really. Don't just say Asian students, you are specific. These Chinese students were doing fine. So Youre sent out a survey to his colleagues at Berkeley and asked that question: why are my black students struggling in the calc class? The number one response from University of California, Berkeley professors was, they're not well motivated. Did I tell you we at Cal? We at Berkeley? We at one of the best schools in the country, but they not well motivated? I don't know about you, but if you've ever seen the University of California application process, I lived in California, trust me. If you're not well motivated, you ain't filling all that stuff out. All right? But that's how faculty felt about them. The second response was, they're not well prepared. So Youre went back and looked at the students' grades in mathematics and their quantitative scores on the SAT. there was virtually no difference between them and their Chinese counterparts. So the third thing that they said was, they lack parental support. Now, Youre is a real researcher because he got on planes and flew to communities, many of them in the South, to see, well, what does the support look like? He said, not only do some of these kids have parental support, he said, when you go into these little country towns, there's a banner across Main Street that says, "Go, Jerome, we counting on you." They're the only kid from their graduating class that went to a place like Cal. So none of those things were panning out, and here's what he did. So this is someone who's really a researcher. He decided to move into the dorm to see how students were studying. Here's what he found. All of the Mandarin-speaking Chinese students were in study groups. All of them. None of the black students. Not one. Then there's some reasons for why they wouldn't be in one. Number one, the reason that they got to Cal probably is because they've internalized this sort of American mythology of you do it yourself. And I call it mythology because nobody does it themselves. You go to our engineering colleges, you go to our law schools, what you will see is everybody's in a study group. But they saw a study group as a sign of weakness. You're saying you don't know enough. The one pedagogical move that Youre made is he required all students to be in a study group. By the second week of his courses, you have to report whose group are you in, who are your group members. One semester of that as a requirement, there was no significant difference in the performance of the students. That's a pedagogical strategy, right? Insist that everybody be in a group. Think about it, it's mathematics. If you're somewhere by yourself doing math and you're getting an answer, you just go on to the next problem. But if you're in a group with 3 other people and 3 people got one answer and you have a different, someone is wrong. And so you got to kind of puzzle it out and figure out and go back step by step. What's interesting is that Youre decided to run the survey at Stanford because he had some colleagues down there. And guess what? Even at Stanford, they said the same thing. Not well motivated, not well prepared, and that they are that don't have parental support. That's at Stanford. He's had his own graduate studies replicate the study. One of them replicated the study at Cornell Medical School about medical students. Why are black students struggling when, in this case, Asian American students seem to be doing much better? Same results. So people already have a notion about what's wrong with the students without thinking about what could we do pedagogically to ensure that students are successful. That having those students is what my students have is their squad. There's an important thing about squads. Having a squad is normal and natural. You have those people you hang with. You shouldn't be surprised that Latinx students are hanging with Latinx students. Somebody I can talk to, I don't have to explain anything to them linguistically. Immigrant students hanging with immigrants, that shouldn't surprise you. Girls hanging with girls, that should not surprise you. It's a context in which it happens. And that if you're going to be successful, you're going to promote and leverage that squad. Figure out how to have those groups of students work productively together. I also want to suggest to you that this having a squad, as I said, is normal and natural because we're social, and that being separated or in solitary confinement can lead to psychosis. You can lose your mind just being with yourself. I have a quote there from Craig Hanley. And so the question is, and I'm mindful of our time, how and when is isolation used in your school? an institution. So take some time to talk with people. How are you guys using isolation? Just tell me one way isolation is being used in your school. Yes.
We talked about how isolation is used in ISS, which is in school suspension, but also in our advanced courses, because sometimes children who could be successful in an environment do not because they feel isolated.
They're isolated, okay. Right.
Students are, I'm sorry.
Let me get here and then I'll get to you, right here.
So I've seen where students are put like on their island, the teacher calls it an island, because they interact, talk too much, and they've been placed there like pretty much all year. You know.
Yes.
When students have been considered academically unsuccessful, they are oftentimes placed in intervention environments.
Okay. And so that takes them away from their peer group. Right. Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
One of the scariest things in habits I've seen are teachers, and we do it sometimes at our school, and trying to break it when they isolate students by putting them out of the classroom. And their student is just, you know, I can't with you right now. Go outside. And then 20, 30 minutes later, that kid is still outside or just wandering around looking for something to do.
So one of the most sort of amazing things I saw around that in the study that I did is this kid was he was having a day. You know, he was constantly being disrupted. And what the teacher said, instead of, I can't right now, she said, Eric, it seems to me that you're struggling, and I don't know why you're struggling. And I don't have time to kind of talk just with you. Here's what I'd like you to do. Take a walk. And if you run into the principal, and he says, what are you doing out here? Let him know that Miss Lewis said that I could take this walk. And when things seem to calm down, then you come back. Now he was mad, and he said to her, well, what if I don't come back? And I'll never forget it, she said, then I'll miss you. But it was not, you get out of here. She didn't make it personal. She said, it looks like you're struggling. And just that little, he came back like in 10 minutes. And just that opportunity to just, whatever, because you don't ever know what kids are bringing from home. You don't know what that day had for them already. So yeah, just putting them out. And indeed, there's some kids, they want to be put out. Because then they don't have to confront failure. Struggling in the class, so if I make enough ruckus, she's going to put me out, right? Somebody else? Yes.
So we talked a little bit about how PhD students are isolated. And that this might be why 50% of PhD students finish all their courses and then never finish their
Don't finish the degree. Well, and the very last part of the work is the most isolating part of it.
Yes.
It's what I call the loneliness of the long distance runner. I can't help you at this point.
And so, you know, what do you do about that?
Right, right. And what we've seen happen that was more successful in Wisconsin is when students get to that candidacy state, they form that group, right? So just like Youre had this, everybody's trying to get their dissertation. They form a writing group. They hold each other accountable. They meet maybe once a week. They read each other's work. That's to avoid the isolation, because the classwork is the easy part. Oh, it's fun. Oh, you know, I'm reading stuff. I'm writing papers. But when you have to just be there by yourself and don't have a schedule, right? That's the hard part. Anybody else? Yes, sorry.
We talked about one of the unintentional ways teachers do is through this push for technology, for personalization. So you're having kids on screens doing their own thing their own way, and so they're not interacting. And I'm a huge tech advocate, but we don't look at the unintended social implications.
Right. Right. So it's not just use the technology instead of, it's integrate the technology and be asking yourself all the time, for what purpose am I using this technology? All right? Okay, I'm going to try to rush through. It's getting late. I want you not to underestimate the power of that squad. We are all influenced by our peers, all of us, not just the students. Students will choose peers over adults, even if it's to their own detriment. Remember from the very beginning I talked about that frontal lobe? That's a non-developed frontal lobe decision. My boys, right? The squad can be a force for good or bad. And I think the role of the adult is to move a squad towards positive goals. How do you get that squad to be doing that positive thing? Students must save face in front of it. And you think about some of the things that you have done to save face in front of your squad. Lie. Girl, where you get that bag from? Oh, you know, we was in New York and you done got that bag off the street. Because them LVs ain't lining up, right? But you're going to lie because you're saving face, right? We exaggerate. Well, how many people was it? Girl, standing room only. Everybody was there. Oh, so you should have been there. We exaggerate. We boast. Oh yeah, I'm just doing great things right now. You know, when I drive up and down the highway and see all these people with these stickers, how many honor roll students is it? Is everybody on the honor roll? And it must be enough for them to make stickers, right? Because you had to, stickers is about volume. I'm like, that don't mean nothing, you know. But we boast, right? And we'll do things to protect a friend or a loved one. Okay, because we want to save face. These squads exist in a cultural context, and I'm going to wrap up with showing you one of my good friends, Christopher Emden, who has, I think, done a great job of infusing youth culture in the teaching of science. This is Chris. He's actually, these people are actually are in his science ed course, and they're doing the DNA dance. So they're all the A's, the G's, and the T, you know, they're all in there together. But let me show you Chris with high school students, and I think I'll wrap up there. I love working with young people who feel like they belong in a classroom, who feel like what they had to offer. You may have noticed that some of the students were writing their stuff on their phone. They're good at that. But if their phone is in a box somewhere, they can't do that. What Chris is trying to do with this work is have us understand that this culture that our kids engage in is actually something even different than, say, their racial ethnic culture. It's youth culture. They're creating it. And I'm so taken by how many different students across different racial, ethnic, and linguistic groups we've been able to reach through youth culture. Now, I've had people say to me, well, what if the kids are not into hip hop? My response is always, what if they're not into Shakespeare? We will teach what we value. And if what we want to show kids is that we are invested in you, in the world you exist in, and we want to help you use that as you move out into wider circles and wider worlds. And you don't have to leave who you are back somewhere. You don't have to become 2 or 3 or 4 different people to be successful. You can bring yourself fully human into the classroom. So I'm going to stop here so that you can ask some questions, and I think we'll be done, okay? Okay, we're doing a Q&A?
I think we're going to do about 10 minutes.
Okay, perfect.
Anybody have any questions?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I've been like a fan, I don't like to use that word, but for a very long time. I started teaching in like 94, 95. And always from the culturally responsive place. And just learning that from the other educators in my family, right? Students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You care about, you show them that you care about getting to know who they are and using that in your all of that. And I just wonder where, so it's been like this long span that I've been in education, but I still don't see people taking hold to culturally relevant pedagogy. And when they do take hold, they do kind of co-opt it into something else. You know, it's teachers still not having a diverse library in their classroom and asking, oh, why do I need that? Are you kidding me? What, like why don't, and it bothers me, right, that I always have to tell people that, like, you need a diverse library, and I'm not talking that you have to have, you know, every book needs to be about guns and gangs, because we're more than guns and gangs, right? Go find a positive book by African American or Latino author and bring it in. You know, so, you know, I get that you want to read, you know, their eyes are watching God, but there are so many other authors, right? Why is that not on your list, and how are you going to teach that? So I guess, what's your feeling on that, and how can we work to get more schools to embrace that they need to?
So teaching is one of the most labor-intensive, difficult professions anybody will ever enter into. And the reward is often so far down the road that it's discouraging. Now, if that were the only issue, I would be probably more optimistic. But we're doing it in an environment in which the society doesn't appreciate what we do. We have so many forces going against, and particularly teaching in public education. You know, I bristle when someone says so-and-so shouldn't be locked in a government school. There are no such thing as government schools. There are public schools that are open to the public. And when we lose that sense of the public good, it's really hard to get up in the morning, work as hard as you can, work to get better, when you're fighting both the forces outside of what you're doing as well as what's inside. The pressure on teachers to produce a score is often more than people are willing to do anything else than, like, let me just get through the FCAT or whatever else was the flavor of the year that our students must do. So it's very discouraging, on top of which, what's the reward for going an extra mile? What's the reward for staying up and looking for a library that's more diverse? What's the reward for making a few extra phone calls each day? There is no reward. At the end of the month, your check is going to be the same as the person who ain't doing nothing. Is that like the man in the movie clip reading the newspaper? He was making the same thing as anybody else who had the same amount of seniority. So it's very, very difficult. And what's interesting to me is I'm starting to see it in other professions. I have some colleagues who are physicians, and given these managed care systems that we're in, when I talk to them about them, my next door neighbor in Wisconsin is a doctor. And I say, Bob, how's it going? How's the work? And he said, it's like working at Oscar Mayer, which is a meat plant, right? He said, it used to be a time that before I would operate on someone, he's an anesthesiologist, before I would operate on a patient, I would sit down and talk with them about which anesthesia drugs I was going to use, what impact they were going to have, how they were going to feel, and then let them know I'll be back when you're in recovery. He said, right now, they just send them in, I put them out. Send them in, I put them out. He says, it's like a factory. So that kind of intensity around the work makes it much more difficult. When I look at our colleagues in an international context in other countries, my colleagues in Sweden, in Japan, they have much more time to sit with their colleagues and talk about their work. They have much more time to design lessons, but they get rewarded for that and not the test scores. You know, we've been chasing the Finns on these international comparisons. When I talk to the Finnish teachers, they say, we don't think nothing about these tests. These tests don't have nothing to do with what we're doing, but they're not sanctioned for their test scores. So I think it's a no-win situation when the school environment you're in is only rewarding a very narrow band of performance, and you just don't get a reward for doing the stuff that you're talking about. So, you know, it's not about people being bad, it's about people making logical decisions in the face of no support, right? Yes?
If you had a building with a culture that was not supporting its minority students, without changing the teachers or the children, what would be the two things that you would change about the environment to support those students?
So I have a very naive theory about school change. And my naive theory says that in any building, there are three sets of people. One set are like what I call my puppy dogs. Their tongues are hanging out. They are so eager for change. Yeah. You want to do something? Yeah, I'll do it different. You want to do, paper bags on our head? Yeah, I'll do that. They'll do anything because they want stuff to change. They're not happy with what's been going on. So those people, you know, they're incredible. Then you got a group, you have puppy dogs, but then you got old dogs. I've been here 17 years. I got 3 more years so I can get my pension. I seen these reforms come. I seen them go. I ain't changing nothing. Okay? Those folks exist. But then you have a group that I call my tennis spectators. And they are watching this interaction like this. They want to know who's going to win. Then they'll join the winning team. So what I suggest to school leaders is, if you want to do a reform, and you really invest it and you think it really may have some traction, take the puppy dogs. And instead of going in and saying, we're all going to do this, and that's the problem, I think we have mandates. And people just naturally bristle. Even if it's a good thing, it's like, oh, you're just making me do this. Take the people who are interested, who want to try something, and say, you know what, we're going to set up an experimental group. So I know we did an example in Madison with the high school where we took a group of teachers in the core subjects, English, mathematics, science, and social studies, and said, how would you guys feel about trying a block schedule? Where you get like 2 hours with students. Instead of students having 7 or 8 classes, they're going to have 4. And then what you do with the experimental people is you support them as best you can, and then you talk them up. So when every faculty meeting is about, well, let me tell you what's happening with our experimental group. We're having X, Y, and Z. When you put out a newsletter, oh, let me just tell you what we found in the experimental group. You want to over-publicize their successes to the point where the spectators are like, well, I'd like to try that. You know, I could do that. So that's how you have to build change. I don't think you can just go in and try to make folk change. You have to be willing to experiment. And you also have to be willing to abandon ship when something, you know what, this really ain't working, so let's not do this. So that's what I would do, is that I would try small groups willing to experiment and to change. One of the things that makes me crazy as a speaker is that somebody, you know, a principal will call me to come and speak to their school. And the reason they're calling me is because they have a day on their calendar in which they need to do some staff development. There's been no thought about what it is I really could offer or what people really need. And then I'm not convinced that everybody needs the same thing. Some people are not having any discipline problems. Why are you sending them to the workshop on discipline? So to the degree that we get to learn more about that thing that we'd like to get better at, you get more buy-in. And that would be the other thing, is to just begin to talk to teachers about what is it that you'd like to work on this year, that you'd like to get better at. You know, I was at a school once and I was talking about parent engagement, parent involvement, and you do know there's a difference, okay, between parent support and parent involvement. Parent involvement is what happens in the suburbs. Them people come up to your school, they volunteer, they want to be the room mothers, they'll go on a trip, they'll bake brownies, they bring popsicles on a hot day, and you actually think they're there to help you. What a fool you are. Them people are on reconnaissance. They've been sent in there by their neighbors, by their squad. They say, go in there and see what them people doing. And I know, because I watch them right in my neighborhood. They be standing right out there in the summertime. Oh, no, girl, you don't want them to have so-and-so for algebra. No, he's terrible. Right? I mean, they literally talk folk up. Parent support is a parent who says, you know what, I work every day. I don't have time to be up here, but if you tell me that there's homework every day, I will ask to see that homework every day, and I won't take any excuses. Parent support is tell me what my kid needs to do, and I will do my best to make sure that gets done. And most teachers, if given a choice between parent involvement and parent support, they just want the support. They just want somebody at home to reinforce what it is they're trying to do at school. So those are two things I think I will focus on. They're telling me I can take one more question. Yes?
Do you find some of the biggest barriers being individuals in schools seem ready to change, but that or in ways perpetuate their own comfortability?
Say that again.
Sorry, so do you find like some of the biggest barriers for individuals who are seeking to change, I guess, school environment or school culture for the betterment of the students, but they seek to do those ways that foster their own comfortability?
Okay.
So like,
So the idea is that there are some folks who have an agenda, and the agenda may not be consistent with student success. They want to be able to say that I, got rid of that principal because I did this, that, and the other, or I made the school do this or that. Those people exist, but they exist in every organization. Schools are not unique in this way. There are people who will subvert the mission for their own self-satisfaction. I work at a major university, did work at a major university, and there's some people who are there only for what they can get out of it. I can use all of these resources and build this new biogenic model, and as soon as I get it off the ground, I'm leaving and doing a startup, right? Not a bad thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have any vested interest in these students who are paying tuition, who want to learn from you. One of the ways that the university copes with that is that if you make it, when you're supposed to work for them, you're going to pay them a licensing fee. So there's always those folks. I think each of us has to ask the question, how close is our agenda to the mission of the institution that we're working with? Sometimes we're at odds with that mission, but we need to be clear that we are at odds with that mission. A lot of our schools are really just set up to keep perpetuating what we've had. As long as the AP students are the right students, and I don't have a mad middle-class parent over here, I'm gonna keep tracking the kids this way. As long as we cut down on the number of fights, doesn't matter whether the kids are actually learning anything, but we don't have any more fights, then I'm gonna be sort of draconian in my discipline and ensure that, I'm putting people out as fast as I can because they don't fit. So I think we all have that responsibility to ask ourselves, how close is my agenda to the mission of the institution? And where they clash, are they so egregious that I really shouldn't be here, or are they things that we can work out? And, you know, now, like I said, I think that's true of any institution. You have been wonderful. I made you work a little bit. I hope you are okay with that. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Lauren Fronstein. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Diversity Committee. And on behalf of our committee, I want to thank you so much for coming over here, for engaging with us. What a great way to spend our Friday night, right? So I wanted to talk a little bit about, very briefly, about the vision of the Diversity Committee. It's a committee of faculty, staff, and students at USF. We all volunteer to do this kind of work because it's what we care about. Our vision is to build an equitable, inclusive, and socially just college of education. And our mission is to build community and capacity to achieve this vision for those who are working at USF. Raise your hand if you're working at USF. Great. If you are studying at USF, raise your hand if you're studying at USF. All right, nice. Raise your hand if you are somebody that's visiting USF today. Okay. And then anybody here aspiring to do so, a future student of USF. Maybe we got this guy right here. In any case, it's through your work, through your ideas, through your presence that you brought all of us into this room to engage in these important ideas. And we are so grateful. This was a phenomenal afternoon. And we can't thank you enough. So thank you. So as a token of this,
oh wow, look at these, aren't they beautiful?
Beautiful flowers.